We know people with ADHD are often excited by entrepreneurship and take up the role of starting businesses much more frequently than people without it. But our ADHD symptoms are a mixed bag when it comes to being helpful or not so helpful with entrepreneurship. So what makes some ADHDers more successful entrepreneurs, whereas others find it a little bit harder? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to Through Your Noise Coaching. My name is Lee and I specialise in helping mid to senior neurospices grow their careers in a way that works for them and their unique brain. This video is part of a three-part series on ADHD and entrepreneurship. This is part 3, and today we're going to look at the circumstances that make entrepreneurial success more likely for someone with ADHD, and actually how that differs between someone with ADHD and someone without it. In my first video, we talked about entrepreneurial interests, i.e. how intrigued someone is to take up entrepreneurship and how likely they are to go into it. It turns out across multiple, huge studies that people with ADHD are far more likely to be interested in becoming entrepreneurs and going through with it. And one of the papers even found us to be twice as likely to pursue entrepreneurship. If you haven't seen this video already, I'd go back and watch it. You can find the link up here. However, just because someone is interested in entrepreneurship, it doesn't mean they're actually successful, because entrepreneurship is really hard, and I know firsthand about that. So in the second video, we looked at entrepreneurship and success and found out that ADHD traits can mean success in entrepreneurship, but also can be a slightly mixed bag when it comes to it, down to it. There was a lot of conversation about our ADHD impulsivity and risk taking, and that we're more likely to take on risk and try out new things, but actually we're more likely to fail as well, because our ideas are more novel and more different and more risky in general. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because you only need one thing to be successful to take you forward, and so multiple failures whilst keeping trying and launching new things might actually lead you to the success in the long run. So it really depends on how you view this as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. One of the papers we looked at considered entrepreneurial orientation and found that it was a predictor of entrepreneurial success. It also found that ADHD symptoms, particularly impulsivity, hyperactively, not so much inattentiveness, were linked to entrepreneurial orientation, thus suggesting they could be linked to entrepreneurial success as well. Another paper argued that looking at ADHD and entrepreneurship as a whole was just far too simplistic, and actually we need to look at the different stages of the entrepreneurial life cycle and see how ADHD interacts with all of these different stages, because ADHD symptoms can be both a benefit and a curse depending on the unique situation that they find themselves in. So this leads to the conclusion that yes, ADHD can be a benefit, it can be helpful for entrepreneurship, but it's not like an ADHD diagnosis is a magic wand and the moment you step into the world of entrepreneurship, success is just going to be rushing towards you. I wish it worked that way, but things are not that simple. So today we're going to look at a particular paper that goes into entrepreneurial passion as well as ADHD and examines which combinations of passion and ADHD traits lead to success. The paper itself is pretty recent and was released in 2021. It's called ADHD Symptoms, Entrepreneurial Passion and Entrepreneurial Performance, and it posits that this passion is the missing ingredient. At first you might be a bit confused. Haven't we already established that ADHD is passionate about entrepreneurship? You already told me they're almost twice as likely to go into it than non-ADHDers. And yeah, that's the kind of feature of some of the language here. Entrepreneurial passion in this context has a definition. There are specific things that make up entrepreneurial passion, whereas entrepreneurial interest, which we were talking about earlier, is more of a kind of vague high-level term by how intrigued someone is by the idea. Before we get into the details, I do need to acknowledge that this paper looks at ADHD symptoms rather than ADHD diagnoses. And we did get into this a little bit in the last episode, but mainly this is to do with the fact that diagnostic standards are different in different countries, that accessibility of diagnostic material or even your socioeconomic status can affect whether or not you get diagnosed. So it's not as straightforward as these people do and these people don't have ADHD. ADHD symptoms are also on a continuum, so it can be really hard to know where to draw the line and say these people are ADHD enough and these people aren't. This is pretty typical in a lot of the ADHD research, but I thought it was important to mention here before we dive into this paper. The definition of entrepreneurial passion they begin with is consciously accessible, intense positive feelings for activities that are central and meaningful to an entrepreneur. And I think this language is important because it highlights the activities that are central and meaningful to becoming an entrepreneur. So we're not talking about the appeal of being your own boss or setting your own hours and all that kind of stuff. We're talking about, do you actually enjoy the activities that you need to do to become an entrepreneur? These activities are split into 3 categories. The first one is a passion for developing. This relates to growing and expanding the business, and someone who's passionate about this might really enjoy finding new employees, getting investment in, or just making sales. The next is a passion for founding, which is bringing together the financial, human and social resources needed to actually get a new venture off the ground. This is bringing the right people and resources together to take a company forward from its very beginnings. The third and final is a passion for inventing, for working with new prototypes, coming up with new ideas, finding new opportunities. This one is all about being innovative and finding new ways to move forward in business. In this paper, they bring in the broaden and build theory, which basically says that if you have positive emotions for something, you're more likely to take action to actually do more of that and learn more of that and just expand your skills and capabilities in that area. So if you like networking, you're more likely to attend network events, to reach out to people, to make friends in that way, and you're going to become an amazing networker. If you're a programmer and you enjoy writing code, then you're more likely to get really good at writing code and be able to be successful at it. We can generalize this to if you enjoy these entrepreneurial passions, then you're more likely to invest your blood, sweat and tears into it, and more likely to grow the skills you need from the people perspective, from the technical perspective, from the learning perspective, in order to be able to be a successful entrepreneur. In particular, passion for developing means someone is more likely to be able to focus on developing their business to take it to the next level. Passion for founding means that someone's more likely to actually create a business and see it through and build it into something more than just an idea. And passion for inventing means that someone's more likely to be able to come up with new creative ideas that they can bring into their world of business. Some of those sound more in line with ADHD than others. One of the hallmarks of ADHD is that we struggle with regulating our focus. And so the paper suggests that by having a passion for developing, that actually means that it pulls our interest-based attention. It means we're more likely to focus on it and invest time into it rather than struggling and getting distracted from it because we are passionate about it, and therefore can actually develop our businesses despite our ADHD symptoms. When it comes to passion for founding, the paper says that there's a lot of literature out there that says people with ADHD aren't very resilient. Funnily enough, there's also a lot of literature out there that says people with ADHD are very resilient because we've had to grow up in a world that doesn't work for us. But I'm not here to kind of debate this point. I'm going to go over what the paper says at this point, that people with ADHD aren't very resilient. But combining that with a passion for founding could cause an ADHDer to push past this lack of resilience and keep going, keep trying, because they enjoy founding and they really like doing it, which makes them more likely to actually found a business in the first place. Finally, they suggest that a passion for inventing might not actually be beneficial to ADHD. For two reasons. One is that it doesn't actually mitigate a weakness of ADHD. We tend to be quite creative and innovative already. But because of this, it can combine with our strength and creativity already and cause us to just spend so much time ideating and coming up with new ideas that we don't actually get anything done. This is what's called a strength being overplayed. A strength that we're putting so much time and focus in it that it actually starts to hurt us rather than help us. I'm actually going to be talking about that a lot in next week's video, so I'm not going to go into it now. But just to say that, it finds that passion for inventing might actually be a hindrance towards ADHD rather than a help. So they suggest that it's a combination of ADHD and a passion for founding and developing, but not a high passion for inventing, that actually tells whether someone is going to be a successful ADHD entrepreneur or not. What's also interesting is they say that the passion for developing and founding must both be present, because otherwise if there's only one, then we might end up hyper-focusing on that particular area of interest to us and therefore neglect the other areas of the business. The paper actually puts this theory to the test as well, using a sample of 2,401 Dutch entrepreneurs who have all been in business for less than 10 years and have at least one employee. It found that the results actually did link up with what the theory is that I described here, with one extra caveat, that they did need a low-level passion for inventing. So not a lot of passion, but a low level, because if you absolutely hate inventing, then it doesn't matter how much your ADHD predisposes you to it, you're probably not going to do it if you hate it. So it kind of makes sense that a low level of passion for inventing is also there. What's also interesting is they actually looked at this configuration among people that don't have ADHD and found that a passion for founding and inventing was actually important. Because if someone doesn't have ADHD, they can get so focused on the development aspect that they might miss out on this new idea ideation and innovation that we tend to come by a little bit more easily. I love that they analyse this for non-ADHDers as well, because I think it reinforces a point, and that is if we treat everyone like they're neurotypical, like they're the same, then some people are just going to miss out. There's so much advice out there for entrepreneurs that is all based around being neurotypical, and I would hesitate to say the majority of entrepreneurial advice we see is all around being neurotypical. But if you have ADHD, that kind of advice could be super damaging to you. You know, if you see something that's going to be constantly ideating for new ideas, that could encourage you to go off in the complete wrong direction and actually damage your success rather than making you successful. Having said this, just because this study says that you're more likely to be successful under a particular combination of entrepreneurial passion and neurotype, that doesn't mean it's your destiny. Everyone presents differently and they have their own individual idiosyncrasies that mean that things are going to work out differently for them. This information is useful, but it doesn't have to be limiting, and we shouldn't be put in a box just because we carry the label ADHD. I know I've experienced that, and I'm sure most of you have done as well. So if you're someone who has ADHD and has a passion for inventing, who am I to tell you no, that you're not going to be successful? Maybe you use your creativity to find a way to make things work, or maybe you find a co-founder that balances you out and brings back that creativity into something that is actually actionable and usable. We are all unique, amazing human beings with such a wide variety of skills and abilities that we make our own paths and we build our own success. You do what is right for you. Our diagnoses and the things we supposedly can or can't do, or should or shouldn't do, are not our destiny. We can find ways to move forwards that work for us. And I wholeheartedly believe that. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. And this concludes our 3-part series on ADHD and entrepreneurship. This is an area that is still being researched, and I'm sure that over time I'll be coming back to this topic as more and more research comes to the foreground. Hit like and subscribe and leave me a comment, and if you haven't seen it already, you might be interested in going back and watching my video on why ADHD evolved. Thank you for your attention today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.